Hi, folks. This is Dr. Rob CYWES here. And today I've just got some absolutely wonderful news. Well, it's a little biased toward me, but as you folks know, I love my coffee. I absolutely love my coffee. Since I lost my weight, I transitioned from Coke and M&Ms to coffee as my bridge drink. And that bridge gives me that little mind cleansing moment. The question is, and the internet is just full of two sides. Coffee's so bad for you and coffee's so good. I've even had people telling me, you're eating disgusting burnt plants when you're drinking coffee. Yeah, it's kind of true if you put it that way. The question though is, where do we stand on this whole coffee debate? And is caffeine, does it have any benefits? And we're going to give you some information today, particularly in the ketogenic or in the low carb, high fat space. And I was talking to a brilliant scientist, and he did this little paper, and I thought, wow, this is so cool, because I drink a ton of coffee. And I want to know, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And I'm going to give you a couple of pros and cons, but here's the cool thing. The title of the article is Caffeine Intake Increases Plasma Ketones, an Acute Metabolic Study in Humans. Blew my mind. So one of the things about this researcher works particularly in the Alzheimer's space, in the brain space, and they look and they've documented many times that as the brain ages, brain glucose uptake declines during aging and is significantly impaired in Alzheimer's disease, becomes impaired in mild cognitive impairment. And what they've proven is that not only are ketones a main alternative fuel to glucose for the brain, but also in order to reduce the risk and possibly even prevent Alzheimer's and cognitive impairment, you want to have a mixture of ketones and glucose for brain, for fuel, and as a substrate. So in this article, they talk about a potential approach to compensate. Think about this, folks. A potential approach to compensate for the brain glucose reduction. So as you age, if the brain reduces glucose consumption, how can you compensate for that? And they looked at caffeine as a potential ketogenic agent, owing to its actions on lipolysis, how coffee helps to break down fat, and the effect on lipolysis, or the breakdown of fat, and lipid peroxidation, which is the breakdown of fat for uses in energy. But what was unknown prior to the study was whether the ketogenic effect of caffeine had benefit in humans. So in this study, they evaluated the acute ketogenic effect of 2 cups of coffee, 2 doses of caffeine in healthy adults. And caffeine was given at breakfast time. And here's the news, folks. They proved that caffeine, a cup of coffee in the morning, significantly stimulates ketone production in a dose-dependent manner. Plus 88% up to plus 116%. So the single best thing, in my opinion, again, this is my bias coming in, that you can have for breakfast, because breakfast is the least important meal of the day, but the single best thing you can do for breakfast is a cup of coffee and a walk. And here now, I have the data, folks. So caffeine given at breakfast significantly stimulated ketone production in a dose-dependent manner and also raised plasma-free fatty acids. So for those of you that have a significant dawn effect, that still have a little bit of insulin resistance, are worried about that high blood sugar and the dawn effect, that release of plasma-free fatty acids is of benefit as a fuel source. Now, this study goes on to say that we don't know of the long-term ketogenic effects because they didn't study them. But here's the interesting thing. They have a positive postulate. It's not a negative, or it's not a I don't know. They say whether coffee has a long-term ketogenic effect or could enhance The ketogenic effect of medium chain triglycerides needs still to be determined. In other words, a large part of a ketogenic diet is the consumption of medium chain triglycerides. And this is the work that this group did. They looked at MCT oil and MCT addition to the diet, and they proved that it positively correlated with a reduction in mild cognitive impairment and a better ketone substrate for the brain. But the question now is whether the caffeine, and they are slightly optimistic that it does, enhances that MCT effect. So folks, this is a paper that confirms that the consumption of caffeine, the consumption of coffee, now if you want to do a Diet Coke, that may also probably be effective because it does contain caffeine if you hate coffee. But the consumption of caffeine triggers a ketogenic effect, which is beneficial to the brain. And that makes me feel pretty good about my cup of coffee in the morning. However, on the other side, we've always got to look at the pros and the cons. In our research, in our own, and this is anecdotal evidence, in our own studies in myself and in a group of my patients who drink a lot of coffee, when we look at the blood work, and this is a concern potentially, is that chronic excessive use of caffeine, like I do, chronic use of caffeine, may potentially cause some damage to the kidney. And what evidence do I have of that? That my cohort of patients that consume a huge amount of coffee, now we're talking about coffee, not caffeine, coffee, do have a slightly elevated creatinine level. And if we look at other confounding factors, if we compare cohorts of people that are almost identical in their diet, but some consume caffeine, some consume coffee, some don't, the creatinine elevation is statistically significant. Haven't published this. These are anecdotal measurables in cohorts of my patients. I've looked at them. I just don't have the time to publish this stuff. So this is not peer-reviewed science. But in my own life, I am somewhat concerned about that. It hasn't yet affected my GFR or the GFR in our own patients, the glomerular filtration rate. So we don't have evidence of damage, but we do have evidence of a slightly increased creatinine. And that may or may not be concerning. So the benefit is caffeine triggers the ketogenic effect. Coffee, whether it's the caffeine or other things in the coffee, may potentially cause a bump in creatinine. But you know what, folks? My choice. I know the data. I know the information. Cheers. Here's to my brain. I can replace my kidneys, can't replace my brain. I am the Carb Addiction Doc. Think about this. Talk to your friends about it. It makes a great talking point and a defensive point if you love your coffee. Talk to you next time.